Till now, in Unit 1, we have discussed the various definitions of communication, importance of communication. We had a look at some clips to understand how communication is important for coordination, for motivation. We also understood that what all goals can you achieve by communicating. Then we had a look at the standard communication model, which we have already covered in the first semester also. We talked about the various elements of communication, and herein we also talked about one thing which was very, very important, which was the context, background in which the communication is taking place. Then we talked about the various channels of communication. We talked about the different types of channels. We talked about the external channels, internal communication channels. We talked about external outward, external inward. Then internal formal channels, internal informal channels, wherein we talked about grapevines. And we said that informal channels are also very, very important in organizations. We talked about the other categorization of channels, wherein we talked about the vertical, horizontal and diagonal channels. And then we had a look at the difference between lateral or horizontal and vertical and diagonal channels by having a look at this particular picture. We talked about how can you be an effective communicator, how can you effectively communicate. We talked about this particular point from the angle of written communication, but then towards the end we also talked about how you can also improve the effectiveness of spoken communication, and we also stressed on the point that listening communication is also very, very important, and how you can also listen effectively. Now is the time for us to understand the barriers to effective communication. I hope you remember that in one of the sessions that we've already had, I had promised that I'll be taking up barriers in more detail in the subsequent sessions. So today we are going to talk about the barriers, and we'll be discussing some of the barriers. I hope you recall the element of noise in a standard communication model. Noise is something that pollutes the communication process, and I had told you earlier also that the other term used to denote noise is barrier. So barrier is nothing but noise, and it reduces the effectiveness of communication, right? Now let's talk about the various types of barriers which are there. So basically there are 5 types of barriers. You have a look here: physical barrier, semantic barrier, cross-cultural barrier. So these are the 3 barriers that we'll be covering today, and then in the subsequent session we'll be covering the psychological barriers and the organizational barriers. Now let's have a look at physical barriers. For example, you are not able to talk to somebody just because you do not have the network. So the mobile is not able to search the network. Have a look at this particular picture, and because of which you cannot communicate to your parents, you cannot talk to your teachers on the video call, just because there is no network available. So this can be an example of a physical barrier. Defect in medium. So this is what we mean by defect in medium. Again, if you are calling up somebody and there are frequent disturbances because of network issue, or maybe you are making a video call but there is low internet connectivity, then again your video call would get disrupted many a times, and these are all examples of defects in medium, which is basically a physical barrier. Then noise environment. What do we mean by noise environment? Noise, we are not only referring to the sound based disturbances in the environment. What we are referring to is anything that stops you from concentrating can be a noise in the environment. Now have a look at these children. If the teacher is there and the teacher is teaching them, right now interval is going on, but if the teacher is teaching them, they would find it a little difficult to understand what the teacher is saying, because they would not be very comfortable sitting on these daris. Or maybe it's very hot and they do not have a fan, so they would not be very comfortable. They would be sweating, and because of which they would not be able to concentrate on what the teacher is telling them. So there would be a barrier in communication, and this barrier is caused by the noise in environment. So anything that might cause you disturbance, that might make you uncomfortable, that might reduce your attention span, and that might make you focus less on what is being communicated, that can be an example of noise in the environment. So what is the noise in the environment? Maybe the fan is not working, it is very hot, so they are not able to concentrate on what the teacher is telling them, or maybe because they are not very comfortable sitting here on these daris, they are not able to concentrate, right? Or maybe because they are feeling hungry, or maybe because they are feeling thirsty, because there is no water supply in the school, they are simply not able to concentrate on what the teacher is saying. So this is an example of noise in the environment. So please remember this point. Noise does not only mean the sound-based disturbances, right? Now let's talk about semantic. What do we mean by semantic barriers? Language-related barriers. Now these barriers are engendered by language. The language that you use, there might be issues with that particular language because of which these barriers come up. Let's have a look at the different types of these barriers. Words with different meanings, and I have taken up this example, spring. Now please understand, this can also be a spring and this can also be a spring. Spring is the season in the month of March, April, which we call Vasant in Hindi. So now if we use this particular word, it is simply not clear, are we referring to this particular spring or are we referring to spring, Vasant, right? So these are words with different meanings. They have the same pronunciation, they are pronounced in similar fashion, and the spelling is also the same, but the meaning could be very different. It could be either this is spring, it could be either this spring, right? So when you use this word in your written communication, there could be a confusion caused for the reader who is reading whatever you have written. Even if you use this while talking to somebody, again the reader might get confused as to which particular spring you are referring to. Is that okay? So this is a barrier both for written communication as well as oral communication. Now let's talk about another type of semantic barriers, words with same pronunciation but different meanings. Now here, have a look. Now the pronunciation is same, the spelling is not the same. The pronunciation is the same. Here and here, almost the same. Now please have a look at what here means. It's some kind of a khargosh, rabbit, and you know that this is what HAIR means. Fine. Now please understand, this could be a problem not in written communication, only in oral communication. Why? Because in the written communication, at least the spelling would be clear to the reader, but that would not be the case in the oral communication. He would listen here, whether you are intending this here or this here. For him the sound is almost similar, so he would not be able to make out which hair you are referring to. So this can be a problem in oral communication. Now let's have a look at another of semantic barriers, new words. You are using all very new words which the receiver of your communication is not aware of, so he would not be able to make out what you mean. So that again may lead to semantic barriers. Then difficult words, very difficult words if you are using. If you remember, when we talked about effective communication, we told you that use simple words, and we talked about the KISS principle, wherein 1S meant simple, keep it short and simple. So you have to use simple words to be more effective, right? But if you are using difficult words, just like Mr. Shashi Tharoor has been using, so now have a look at these words: rhodomontade, snollygoster, farrago, calumni, frisson, puerile. And you can do without using those words because you have simpler synonyms of these words in the English language. But if you start using these kind of words, and especially if you are using this with an audience which is not well versed in English, definitely you would not be able to communicate effectively, right? So difficult words can also cause semantic barriers. Now let's talk about the cross-cultural barriers. These come up because the sender and the receiver of the information are from different cultures, and the sender has not customized his message according to the culture of the receiver. Now have a look at what all can cause these barriers. Symbols with different meanings in different cultures. Have a look. Donkey in India and donkey in USA. This is the election symbol of the Democratic Party. so it must be having a very positive connotation in USA, America, while in India we consider this as a very derogatory word. Some student is not doing well, generally teachers refers to him as donkey. Your parents might, when they are very angry, they might refer to you as donkey. So it's a derogatory meaning that we attach with donkey here in India. This is because of different meanings for the same word donkey in India and America. So naturally, if somebody in India is using this word and the receiver is there in America, he may not be able to understand what the sender wants to communicate to him. So it might be a teacher in India calling his student in America donkey, while the teacher means that you are not doing well in your studies. The student in America would be very, very happy because there is a positive connotation attached with this particular word in America, right? Now let's have a look at another reason for cross-cultural barriers: colors with different connotation in different cultures. Now have a look. In Hindu funerals, generally this is the color that is used, white color. A widow generally wears white. On the other hand, have a look at Christian marriages. Now there, in an auspicious ceremony, in marriages also they use white color. So naturally these colors, the color white has different meanings in different cultures. While in the Christian word, this color denotes some festive occasion, it's not the case in the Hindu culture, right? Now different concepts of time and space. What do we mean by this? We need to understand. Have a look at this particular picture. Now this is the ex-president of America, Obama, and he's kissing a woman. Now tell me whether this woman is a close relative of his, or are they couples, are they husband wives, or maybe girlfriend and a boyfriend, or are they just friends, or are they complete strangers? And you would be probably thinking that they must be either a couple or they might be very close friends. Otherwise, in India, at least in our culture, we generally, people of opposite sex generally don't kiss in public, right? Until unless they are very close, they are very intimate, their husband wives or maybe girlfriend boyfriend, they generally won't kiss. So what, as somebody from Indian culture, you would infer from this picture? You would infer that probably they are very, very intimate, but you would be surprised to know that they are complete strangers and they are probably meeting for the first time, right? So this is what we mean by different concept of time and space. They've come so close. That is what I mean by different concept of time and space. They've come so close, though they are complete strangers. In India, they won't come so close until unless they are very, very intimate, unless until they are very closely related. You would not find even a father and a daughter coming this close in India, right? So there's a different concept of time and space in different cultures. For example, in India, generally if you are asked to come at 11 o'clock to a marriage function, you arrive at generally 12:30 or 1 p.m. considering it's perfectly fine and nobody would be offended. But if you repeat the same kind of thing in America, the people who invited you would feel offended. So there's a different concept of time and space. There's a different concept of time and space everywhere. Here in India, 11 o'clock may not always mean 11 o'clock. It may mean 12 o'clock or maybe 1 p.m. On the other hand, in America, if you go, 11 o'clock would mean sharp 11 o'clock. And that is why if you are late by even a minute for a business meeting in America and in many European cultures, it would be considered offensive and you may have to lose your business, right? So in the next session that we'll be talking about the organizational barriers. Please go through whatever we have discussed today.